of the closing doors, please.
Welcome to Subway Sports Talk. My name is Peter Kennedy, and I am your host. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning into SST on Apple Podcast app, Spotify, and on YouTube. Joining me today, our designated hitter, here to talk things baseball, Mets, Yankees, and whatever else comes to our minds, because as you know, we go off the rails from time to time. That's okay, but mostly we'll be locking in on them Mets and them Yankees, because we've neglected them, and maybe rightfully so, because there's a lot to break down about both of these teams, for better, for worse, for everything in between, and nobody better than Andrew Calagna to talk about it with me. Andrew, what's up, my guy? It's been a minute.
Hey, how's it going? I'm ready to break down the topics. I got the internet buzzing today, my friend. They are buzzing. Did you see that fake Fast and the Furious post-credit thing that's making its rounds online? So it's Vin Diesel. He's like in a dark back alley. And then, you know who shows up? Optimus Prime.
Oh, my God.
And like, they're trying to tease that the next Fast and Furious is going to be like a Transformers crossover. And know what the crazy part about it is like, it kind of makes sense. Like,
it's believable.
It's very believable if that's a direction that Fast 11, or we at 11?
I believe.
That Fast 11 wanted to go and they wanted to do a Transformers crossover, like, fuck it. It makes sense. At
that point, it actually would make it more believable. Right? Mm-hmm. Like, in a way, if the Transformers showed up in the Fast franchise, in that world, in that universe, it would become more realistic. Honestly, I don't know if that's a crazy thing to say, but I think that makes sense. Because I heard someone on a podcast talking about Fast and Furious, and they were basically saying, like, they were trying to decide, is the Fast franchise, is that considered fandom, right? Like Marvel, DC, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, they're all considered fandom pretty straightforwardly, right? Because you understand that they're in this fantastical world with powers and witchcraft and yada, 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 yada. Fast is closer to that than it is to almost any other type of action film because of the ridiculousness. Like, even if it just comes out that all of the Fast people have super healing powers, like, it would make sense. It would make sense. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, I also haven't watched a Fast movie since maybe Tokyo Drift or the one after that. It was the one with the 19-minute long runway on the plane where they were on the same runway for had to be 20 minutes of the movie towards the end of the film, and they're jumping in, they're jumping out. This plane, I mean, it must have been at the biggest airport in the world, because it was on the runway for so freaking long. And that's when I was like, oh no, this movie is not real. It's not for me, and it's trash. And then you come around to it later on and you say, listen, it may still not be for me, but it is not trash because it actually knows exactly what it is, and it's not pretending to be a realistic action film. And there it lies the victory of Fast franchise.
Well, I think the problem with the Fast franchise is that there's like a lot of people enjoyed it at its roots when it was just like a race car movie.
Yeah.
With some TNA shots thrown in there every once in a while. Again, I think the last one I saw is they were pulling a safe. Two cars were pulling a safe around Rio de Janeiro. It's like around the like a 50-ton safe. Just two muscle cars just happen to be, and it's like spinning around,
sure,
causing all this damage. Yeah, you could totally do that with two cars. So yeah, like I get, some people yearn for the a traditional racing movie, but it's just one of those things where it evolves and becomes something almost unrecognizable.
And I think the fans of it are clearly okay with it, right? Maybe some people still hate watch it, but I think a lot of people who enjoy it, they just completely suspended belief a long time ago, and they're okay with that. It's not different from you and I going to watch an Avengers film or The Flash that's coming out in a little while, or we just saw Guardians. Like, in the reality of our lives and movie watching lives, they're closer than most other films, which makes sense to me. And listen, I'm not going to go watch them. I don't care about them. Tokyo Drift was the end for me. That was a great film, and then I was done. It's all good. Everyone who enjoys them, enjoy them. If you love Fast and Furious, please tell us why, because I think I got it. I think I'm on to it. It almost comes back to something else I was talking to a buddy about. We'll get to baseball in a minute. DJ Khaled. Okay? Now, who would have thought there was a Fast and Furious DJ Khaled analogy coming. Nobody. That's why you come to Subway Sports Talk, okay? There was a point in my life where I loathed DJ Khaled. And I was like, this dude is pathetic, like so thirsty for the spotlight. What a clout chaser. Does he even make the music, or is he just getting
He just yells
on
DJ Khaled before the music starts?
What is his role? Is he actually producing these tracks? Like, is he just there? Did he produce one good track and wrote it out? Like, I just didn't like him. I didn't care for it. I didn't like his music very much. It was just poppy BS, whatever. And now I've reached a point where I don't know if he is extremely self-aware or still unextremely self-aware, but I find him hilarious. I find him a joy. And I find his humor, again, if he's trying to or not, wonderful. And guess what? He makes hits. Sure. I went from hating DJ Khaled because I didn't like what he stand for, because I was a nose in the air, snooty tooty music fan who said, screw this DJ Khaled. And now I literally watch his Instagram stories and videos of him playing golf and just saying the most ridiculous stuff to camera. And I just smile, Andrew. I just smile. Is that the Fast and the Furious DJ Khaled analogy that makes sense?
Oh, absolutely. And the Fast and Furious, it kind of harkens back to, like, I don't know, before there were like actual franchises, you would kind of just go see like a Schwarzenegger movie, before he
was his own IP.
Yeah, he was his own IP, and I feel like Vin Diesel and like that crew is just like that, they're their own IP. Like the Fast and Furious, it could be whatever it wants to be. It could just, as long as they're all together and they say family a bunch of times, then that's a Fast and Furious movie. But we can do it right now. Pete, we're family, so this is Fast 12.
I was going to question you because you said Vin Diesel and that crew, and I was going to say that what? that crew? Don't undersell a family by calling them a crew. That's messed up, Drew. That's messed up. I digress. That's enough off the rails talk for now. Who knows where we'll go by the end of the show. But it's time to talk about baseball, and it's time to talk about the Mets and the Yankees. And I got to say this, Drew, in your hockey Rangers watching endeavors, in my Knicks watching endeavors, it couldn't have come at a better time. Because we caught the beginning of the Mets and Yankees season, all things were looking fine. Teams were looking solid. The health wasn't great, but it was okay. They were winning games despite that. They were in the upper echelon of their respective divisions. And then the Knicks made a playoff run, and the Rangers didn't necessarily make a playoff run, but they were in the playoffs, and we were locked in. And maybe we diverted our attention just a little bit. And maybe that was a good thing, Andrew, because over the last month and a half, these teams have not been very good. Yankees better than the Mets. Yankees are more on track now than the Mets are, despite the Mets' wonderful weekend against the Rays and the Guardians. But we seem to be getting back to a place of stability to an extent. There's plenty of stuff to talk about, and we're going to get into all of it. Do you want to start with the Yankees or the Mets? Because there's an argument about what's more pertinent. Obviously, what's more interesting is always going to be to what fan we're talking about. But do you think there's a reasonable argument to be made to start one team off ahead of the other?
No, because they both have very similar issues. It's on offense and it's injuries. So it's a coin flip on which team. They're very similar in that regard. Of I questioned the Yankees offense a lot more than the Mets before the season started, and I was pretty confident in the Mets' ability, if they needed a bat, that to be able to call up on the kids and get that juice, and that's exactly what they've done in the last 10 days. So it's really a coin flip on both teams and their both struggles at the moment.
So I say let's start with the Yankees then. Let's start with the Yankees, a slightly more positive note. We'll get to the Mets. And honestly, you're right. The conversations are not super dissimilar. At this specific point in time, we're recording this during both of their games on Tuesday night. There are questions about both managers.
Volpe just walked it off.
Who did?
Volpe just walked it off.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Yeah. So good thing we're starting with the Yankees. There's questions about both managers. There's been questions about Boone for years. There's now questions rising about Buck Showalter and his decision-making with the lineup and riding some of the older guys when these young guys seem like they're ready to make an impact. There's questions about the health on the starting pitching front, like you mentioned already. And there's question marks in both bullpens because neither team has a true closer right now. And the Yankees bullpen possibly a little bit better than the Mets right now, but still question marks, right? So let's start with the Yankees, and we'll go from there. Outside of Anthony Volpe, who has been a bright spot despite not having like the most wonderful statistics, like he has been a bright spot, and we're happy to see him there. What has been one of the things that you've hung your hat on? I want to start positive here, like DJ Khaled, all right? I want to bring some DJ Khaled energy here. Drew, what's a positive thing, before we get into all the negatives, what besides Judge and Volpe, what's the positives that you're actually looking at with this Yankees team before we get negative?
I had two guys in particular. Anthony Rizzo, he's been, I wouldn't say he's been bad as a Yankee, but he's definitely hasn't been that vintage Cubs, Anthony Rizzo dependent, guy that you can heavily lean on. Now with the advent of the shift ban, he's been on that level, and it's been very, especially with Stanton being injured, and even when he was on, he was been ineffective as he was for much of last year. So him being that true complement to Judge, that lefty batting behind him, and he's been better than advertised. And the other guy I would say is Harrison Bader. Since he came back off the IL, he's been absolutely mashing, picking up where he left off in the postseason last year, and his defense in center field is something they desperately needed, keeping Judge in right field and keeping his legs fresh. So those two guys in particular have been real standouts for me, watching them on a day-to-day basis.
And I think when you do those 2 points right there, and obviously we didn't mention a Garrett Cole who's been Garrett Cole and just so consistent, better than consistent actually. He's been probably his best year so far as a Yankee to this point. But after those offensive people that you kind of just pointed out there, you look through this lineup and that's basically it. Like that is basically the bright spot on this team, or the bright spots on this team. Because you look through the rest of the lineup there, you got Glaber, who's been kind of status quo-y. He's not playing bad, but he's not playing great. He's got a 112 OPS. LeMahieu, very, very average to this point. Nothing special at all. And that's really it. Everyone else has been bad, almost. Right? So you look through this lineup and the question marks we had coming into the lineup, and that's why I wanted to almost get those positives out of the way, because now all these question marks arise. The Bader thing to me is enormous because, he also plays a good center field for the most part. He's been hitting very well for the most part here. He shores up a big-time question mark. And with that question mark being shored up, there are still more, right? So let's talk about, now that we got the positives out of the way, what has been most disappointing to you with this Yankees lineup? We'll start there.
Oh man, where do you even begin? There are times, when Judge had the 10 days on the IL, there were times where they were throwing out a lineup with like 3 competent major league hitters in it. You're having lineups with Willie Calhoun, Frenchie Cordero, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, Oswald Cabrera, and like Kyle Higashioka, like all batting back to back to back to back. Like it's just so many, all their the problem from the offseason kind of reared its ugly head. And Cashman came out and said, he said, just like, I can't really make any additions in May. Like, you got to just hope that you stay healthy. But I would argue that if you would have planned better in the offseason and built yourself a decent bench, you wouldn't have to worry about injuries and relying on, injury-prone players. Like, are you really that shocked that Giancarlo Stanton got hurt? Are you really that shocked that, Josh Donaldson got hurt? Like, those have been 2 injury-prone guys. The last 3 years of their career, so the lack of depth and the automatic outs that persisted throughout the lineup and still persist throughout the lineup on a regular basis. Like Willie Calhoun couldn't make the major league roster out of spring training, but then the second he gets called up, he's batting like 5th, like 4th and 5th in the middle of the order. I'm like, which is it? Is he not good enough to make the team, or is he like a middle of the order bat here? Like I don't understand that one. And Jake Bauers has been like a nice story, and he's had some some decent hits here and there, but like that can't be your like plan A in the outfield. And Aaron Hicks, RIP to Aaron Hicks after getting DFA'd. which was actually, I think we all saw the writing was on the wall there for Aaron Hicks, but at the same time, I didn't think he was going to be on this roster past July because he had his 10-5 rights were kicking in, I think around the end of July, beginning of August. So 10-5 rights, no one's familiar. So if you are in the majors for 10 years, with 5 of them within the same team, you automatically get no trade protection. So the Yankees were not going to allow that to happen, especially if Hicks continued to be the same hitter he was like the last 3 years. So he wasn't sticking on the roster, but in all fairness, is Greg Allen really that much of an upgrade where where you're going to eat all that money? But I don't think it really matters at this point. But again, you're talking about a really shallow bench. You're talking about hoping that guys continue to stay healthy because, again, you really have no depth offensively. And until, teams start to fall out of it, there's not really going to be any kind of outside help coming in to help the Yankees at all.
Yeah, all those points are fantastic. And I still laugh about when you said the Yankees are bringing up Calhoun. And I was like, Cole Calhoun? And then they actually looked at Cole Calhoun later on, like a week or two later.
Yeah.
Because I obviously didn't know who Willie Calhoun was.
They have the monopoly on all the Calhouns, all the quad A Calhoun players. They're all in the Yankees.
Yeah, that made me laugh. But to your point, the offense looks super bleak at certain times. Like even some of the guys you were hoping for a little bit of a burst from, Oswald Peraza and Cabrera, like they really haven't done it yet to this point. Like they haven't played a ton, but they've played a good chunk of games here and there, and obviously Cabrera a lot more than Peraza, but there hasn't been that spark that you hope for. Because when you bring up a rookie the year prior, we've seen it with a lot of players. You saw it with Judge in his first year, not good. Came up in his real true rookie year, as I do air quotes, and was really good. Even Alvarez, who came up last year for the Mets in a spot where they were desperate for juice on offense, and he fell on his face. And then this year he comes up, and look at that. He's making better contact. He's hitting for power. He's making some of those plays. You were hoping for that from Cabrera or Peraza or both, and you got none of it to this point, which has been a struggle. And looking through that lineup, it's just not something we're quite used to with the Yankees when you get to 5 and it's Gleyber Torres, and you're like, oh, my God, that's the end. That's it. Yeah. Now we're going to hope that our backup catcher does something or 14th outfielder does something. That's really been where the Yankees are. Like Jake Bauers has played 17 games for the Yankees this year. I didn't know who he was before this season, and maybe that's on me, but I don't think it is.
I like to think that I know fairly deep about baseball, but Jake Bauers was a new name for me as well. So don't feel bad there, Pete.
Yeah, and it just it comes back to that point of the Cashman of it all, the Boone of it all, the Yankees of it all, the Steinbrenner of it all, where there's a reason that people like you, Drew, and Alec, I forget where his stance was during the offseason, if he was mad or not. He's kind of hard to read sometimes. But a lot of Yankee fans out there were upset. And there were a lot of Mets fans and a lot of regular baseball people and other Yankee fans who were saying, you're being dramatic. This team's going to win 95 games still. This team's going to be a 100-win team. And they very well still could. And right now, my biggest question is too, Drew, how much can you truly rely on Aaron Judge? Because when it comes down to it, this Yankee offseason, in the eyes of Cashman and Steinbrenner and Boone, was a win because they retained Aaron Judge. And this season, to a point, has been a win so far, for the most part, just based off having a winning record, because of Aaron Judge. And I don't know how sustainable that is to rely on one man to have all that power.
Well, I think they had a losing record when he was on the 10-day IL. So, when he's not in the lineup, again, even tonight, perfect example. He had a tough at-bat against the Baltimore closer, and he tied up the game today. He was able to, stay back after the guy was pumping 100, and then he just laid back, waited for his pitch, and he took it deep, and he was able to tie the game. He is the best player in baseball. I know Trout and Ohtani are there, but Aaron Judge, for everything that he does for this team, how much he elevates the team and how much he puts them on his back, he's the best player in baseball, hands down. They'd be they'd be absolutely lost without him, and he deserved every single dollar of the contract that he got.
And wait, real quick on that, because I don't want to go off that before I forget this. The Ohtani point of it all, and I was working at the Fan back-to-back overnights this weekend, so I heard a lot of Yankees smatterings of talks and points that were both smart and really stupid. But one of the points that comes up is Judge being the best player in baseball versus Ohtani. That just comes up every once in a while, right? Ohtani deserves his own category. And I think that's okay. Because I think it's completely fair to say Shohei Ohtani is the best player in baseball. It's fair. And as a Judge person, you can't really argue against it. And that's why Ohtani just belongs in the Ohtani category. It's as if Josh Allen, right, who's probably a top 5 or 6 quarterback right now in the NFL, also got 15 sacks a year, played defensive end.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just think about that. Think about it. Well, basketball and hockey don't count because you do kind of play on both sides, right? But in football, you only play one side. You don't play offense and defense. If Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes played DB or defensive end or linebacker and was like a top 10 tackler or 15 sacks a year or 7 picks, that's Ohtani. Like, it's not fair. It's not the same. So that conversation is going to come up a lot once the MVP race becomes more true. And I think Ohtani will win this one as long as he stays healthy, just because Judge won last year, right? Like, it's going to be one of those stupid things. But Ohtani deserves his own category.
Listen, Judge is on the same exact pace. He's on the same exact pace that he was last year. So
But I agree. You're right.
If Judge hits 60 home runs in back-to-back seasons, like the only way Ohtani doesn't win an MVP is unless someone does something historical. If Judge hits 60 back-to-back, that'll be real. That again,
he needs to surpass last year.
He needs to hit 63.
Yeah, he does. He really does. Honestly, because I think we just saw it with the Jokic thing and Embiid thing in the NBA. Like, Jokic won back-to-back MVPs, and a lot of voters to this point have been now saying, watching the playoffs, like, you know what? I didn't want Jokic to win 3 MVPs. I didn't want him, a guy who's never won or made it to a finals, never won a finals, to be a back-to-back-to-back MVPs, to join the likes of the greatest players of all time. Not yet, right? And I think similarly for Judge, if he's coming off a World Series, if he's coming off even a World Series appearance, I think the reality of him winning another MVP is a lot higher. But right now, just based off of what Ohtani is doing and not winning last year, I think the narrative is going to be too strong. I do. I think Judge will have to overdo the 62 home runs from last year to actually win the MVP. And is that right or wrong? We can deliberate that for hours. We're not gonna. But again, that's why Ohtani deserves his own category. Just give him like half of a Cy Young award and an MVP award. Meld them together and give him his own award.
It's to bring up the Ohtani again. So again, I don't know if you're the Angels. Like, you have to be so far. I mean, he's a free agent at the end of the year. So how far out do you have to be to entertain trading him? Like, now, because again,
they're close enough right now.
Yeah, you can't. They have to be. I think you have to be double digits out for them to think about trading Ohtani. But then at the end of the day, if I don't think there's any chance that he stays with the Angels. So like, what do you do then? Like, if you could trade him and get multiple top prospects, and because he's such a special talent, like the team trading for him is going to get an ace level pitcher and a 30 home run bat, you like, if the Mets would trade for him, if they ask for Alvarez and Mauricio or Beatty, like it's a reasonable ask to ask for a rental. Absolutely.
Is it a reasonable ask? But is it a reasonable give? And I think what's going to happen here with the Angels situation is other teams like the Mets, like whoever might be interested, is going to be too nervous about paying that price on a rental, not knowing where he's going to go. That's going to either drive the price down, or the Angels are just going to stop doing business. And I think that, end of the day, Angels are going to be just close enough, as that division has been great with the Rangers playing as good as they have. But they're going to be just close enough because the Central's horrible. If some of the East teams kind of fall off, if the Orioles fall off, if the Red Sox and Blue Jays fall off, they have a realistic chance at one of the wild card spots. And as an Angels organization who has spent all this money for absolutely no success, they will do whatever the hell they possibly could to be in a playoff game, even if it's a one-and-done wild card, or I guess no one-and-done anymore. But besides the point, whatever has to be done for them to be in those playoffs will be done. And I do think the combo of not knowing where he'll re-sign will be more than enough for the Angels to close up shop and say, we'll cross that bridge when we get there, and this might be an absolute travesty, but we're not trading him for one or two prospects. It has to be an absolute haul.
Yeah.
Haul.
It's got to be like a Juan Soto level haul. Even then, like C.J. Abrams and Mackenzie Gore were top 15 prospects in baseball when they're traded. So like, and for Juan Soto, and you got multiple seasons of Juan Soto. So like, man, it's just tough. It's just tough because if you let him go at the end of the year and you just get like a draft pick compensation for him, you're gonna feel like shit afterwards. But it's a damn if you do. You're gonna feel like shit regardless because just be better. Just be better, Angels. Just be better.
Yeah. Oh, they're being okay right now. They're being
just okay.
Yeah, they're being okay. All right, let's go back to the Yankees.
But who else has been just like who not been great either has been all the other Yankee starters outside of Cole. Even Cole tonight got lit up a little bit. Like Nestor, I feel like I have a really bad feeling that the league has kind of figured out Nestor Cortez, and the kind of the magic has kind of run out. He's got a 5.2 ERA. He's given up a ton of like. He's not fooling anybody with the mechanics or the changing speeds. Like he's gonna, as many hits as he has in innings. He's walking a ton more guys than he was last year. Clark Schmidt's got an ERA of 6. He's been, the only reason he's staying in the rotation right now is just out of like sheer desperation. Because again, you just got Sevy back, but then Herman, got caught with sicky stuff like twice. So it's outside of Cole. And, Sevy looked, pretty good in his debut for, against the Reds. But outside of Cole, like, the rotation, which you really thought was going to be a strength going into the year, has also been a pretty big negative overall as a group.
And on the Nestor front, do you think that the pitch clock is actually hurting someone like him? Because you can argue part of his lore was the fast pitch into the really slow pitch into the I'm going fast, now I'm waiting, now I'm hanging my leg up, now I'm going fast. Like, he really utilized all that to his advantage as much as he possibly could. Just mixing people up, keeping them on their toes. And now every hitter is used to it at this point, 50 games in. They're more or less used to just being in the box, being ready. And that little dynamic that he had before, it kind of doesn't exist anymore, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, like he still does like a little bit of it, but again, you're part of the motion, the start and stop kind of motion. That's a balk now, so like he's kind of had to change it up a little bit. So maybe it's an adjustment period, but I feel like the league has caught up to Nestor, and it's really up to him now to see if he can adjust back. But it's Sevy coming back has been, hopefully it's a real uplift. But again, I'm not sure how certain you can be that he's not going to get hurt again between now and, the rest of the year. So, again, they've already used all of their starting rotation depth, and God knows what the hell's going on. Rodon, goes for the lat strain, and now he's got a chronic back thing where he's getting shots, and then he's thrown off the mound, and he's not thrown off the mound, and he's going to go to a bullpen, and then he's actually throwing on flat ground. Like, it's turning it very much into I don't even want to say it's turning into a Carl Pavano type of situation where it's just like, when is this guy going to fucking throw? Like, you just gave him 106. Like, come on, let's get a move on here. Like, I understand that you want to be like extra cautious and like not push him because it's May, but like, look at the state of the rotation right now. Like, you need all the help that you can get, especially with the state of the offense and them trying to struggle to score runs against good teams. The Yankees have never had a problem beating up on bad teams. They're often when they were playing the Reds. And I forget the other crappy team they were just playing last week. But, they can they'll beat up on bad teams. They always have. They always will. It's always just a matter of do they get themselves up for, like, actual contenders is where they run into trouble. And that's when you need all the offensive and the talent that you can have. And unfortunately, again, as we were saying before, really lacking the depth just overall in the starting rotation and on offense.
So where do they go from here, Drew? Where do the Yankees go from here? Because obviously you can talk in theory about the ideas of trades and people being better or yada yada, people coming back from injury. Is it that simple? Is it just waiting for guys to get healthy, or is there something that they have to do to make this team better and deeper and more consistent?
I mean, it's kind of with the kind of painting themselves in the corner here. They really have nothing else again until you get deeper into the season where teams aren't going to contend anymore. There's now really outside help coming, so it's really just hoping that Stanton, and Donaldson can just provide a little more, can get healthy and provide a little more depth, and Rodon can finally get going, and they did get Sevy back, so it's really about that. And Anthony Volpe, as I said at the in the preseason podcast, that he was going to start off slow. I knew he was going to start off slow. That's what he historically did. It usually takes him 20, 25 games to get used to the level, and he's been such a different hitter this last month than he was at the beginning of the season. So having him being the kind of the player we were all hoping to be, the kind of player we saw in spring training, being the real Anthony Volpe, I think that's going to be a big lift to the offense overall, though. And I really do like the fact that he's batting in kind of lower in the lineup rather than that pressure of him like leading off, because I feel like he's trying to do too much when he leads off, and he feels a lot more comfortable down, in the 6, 7, 8 spots in the lineup. So I think that's the perfect spot for him until you get some other guys back.
And he supplemented some of his early season struggles with some surprising pop and power.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think if you would have guessed about his stats to this point, you would have assumed he stole double-digit bags already. You would have assumed that he hit a triple or two, maybe a couple doubles. You wouldn't have assumed 7 home runs.
Yeah, no.
Right? And that regard, like, he really has helped swing games. And that's been the blessing of Anthony Volpe, and something that we spoke about before this season. Like, he didn't have to be fantastic to make a positive impact. And that's what we're seeing already, right? Like, he is good enough at enough things to consistently be a winning style baseball player. It's one of those old school type of things too, right? Like, it's not always quantifiable by the way of the statistics we care about most, right? He has an OPS plus under 100, so he's below average as a hitter. But from an impact perspective, you can easily argue that he's been the third or fourth most important player on this Yankees offense, even though from the traditional statistics, he's not been the third best hitter on the team. So that's such a positive and such a win that the glove looks good, the intangibles are good, and the sneaky pop is there, right?
Yeah.
Like, is he going to be a 25 home run a game guy in the next 2-3 years of his young career while he's still young and not his strongest self yet? Maybe not. Maybe not. But to show this type of pop in the struggle of his early portion of his career, man, that's been a blessing this year, and sneaky been very valuable.
Absolutely. And the defense that he's so smart in the field. He absolutely, is a very, very different than watching, Gleyber Torres or Kiner Falefa. He's going to make the simple plays. He's going to be there for, spectacular plays. And he absolutely, smart baseball IQ, always knows what's going on around the infield, always makes a smart play. So he's been everything, as advertised and then some.
All right, last thing on the Yankees. I don't know, we need to bring it up. Where are you at currently with Aaron Boone, Drew?
Oh, God.
We have to bring it up. We have to bring it up because no matter how good or bad the Yankees play, it's been consistent for 5 freaking years. They win a bunch of games and no one cares about Aaron Boone. They lose a bunch of games and it's all his fault. Is that me leading on the witness? Is that bad job by me? Because that's what I read.
No, oh yeah, well, definitely, because the problem is that when you have all these injuries and you have your depth is depleted, the manager becomes all that more important because he has to press all of the right buttons more often than he does when he's got a full squad firing on all cylinders. And Aaron Boone gets, when the Yankees are playing well, his decision making gets masked so well that it makes it seem. But when he has to actually press the right buttons, and perfect example was when Garrett Cole, I think it was when they were up 6-0 versus the Rays 2 weekends ago in Tropicana. Garrett Cole, he didn't have his A stuff. He struggled to to finish off the fifth inning, and he had like 80 something pitches. And, anyone watching the game saying, he started off strong, but he's really been struggling the last inning or two. And then what did Boone do? Up 6-0, he tried to steal outs out of a struggling starter. And, the Yankees end up losing that game, 7-6. Or I don't know if it was 7-6, but they end up losing the game. So all because, Aaron Boone just couldn't, always tries to do too much with his starters, or whether it's, was it Herman when he was in the ninth inning, 8 1/3 innings with like 79 pitches or something like that, and he takes him out. Like, you would have never done that to Garrett Cole, but you did that, with Herman. And again, the Yankees lost the game because they brought in the bullpen, early and not sticking with your starter who was cruising at the time. So again, it's always a lack of feel for Aaron Boone. It's always a lack of, when the game goes off script, he's never able to actually adjust. And he always seems to push the wrong button when, it's kind of clear as day on what exactly he should be doing. Again, he has more information than us. He knows a lot more about the inner workings of which guys are fresh and all that stuff. But as an outsider looking in, it just seems like he's making a lot of curious moves when the margin of error is just so slim. With all the injuries and losses that the Yankees currently have on their roster.
So it's not fair to just say his hand has been a crap hand. He's playing with a 2 and a 7 in Texas Hold'em right now. That's not fair to say. Like, does that not give him enough leeway at this point? Because let's be honest, the pitching staff brutal to this point. The hitters brutal to this point. How many buttons can he push to make this team better right now?
I'm at the same, when you have the players that you do have, it's not a matter of the guys aren't coming through. I guess, like, he's not. It's not like he's making a choice between, he's benching Calhoun for Franchi Cordero or something like that. But it's like stuff where it actually matters with, like, again, with the pitching moves and things like that. I don't think it's some of it's talent, but I feel like some of it's more of, he's just like, there's some obvious moves to make in the game, kind of right in front of his face. He just doesn't have that feel for it that, that you really would like him to. Something that Buck Showalter seemed to have had before this year, but doesn't seem, he's kind of seemed to have the same similar Aaron Boone problems. If I've been, paying attention enough to the Mets and hearing the complaints about him on social media as well. How about that for a transition?
It's a great transition, and we're going to get there. Yeah, and I agree. And I don't want to be the guy who dies on Aaron Boone's hill. I don't, because I don't think he's a great manager. I do get frustrated with Yankee fans who act like he's the worst manager in the league, right? So I do think there's some sort of happy medium where that's irrelevant because it's not a fun conversation to have, that, yeah, Aaron Boone might be average. But average ain't good enough for the Yankees. It's never been good enough for the Yankees, and their level of average is what they've been for 5 years now. Consistent playoff team, teetering between 90 and 105 wins. Like, that is their average. It's just like DJ LeMahieu. I said that technically he's been average this year. For him, that's bad, right? So for the Yankees, Aaron Boone is bad. So I don't want to act like I think Aaron Boone is great and should be the manager long-term for the Yankees. I just do like to make sure that Yankee fans are aware that this dude ain't exactly have an easy job right now, right? So it is somewhere in the middle.
The problem is that he's making the same mistakes that he was making 5 years ago.
Right.
And that's the problem. It's not
the same points that everyone's been frustrated about.
Exactly. And he hasn't seemed to learn from any of those mistakes. He hasn't seemed to improve on again, if he's a neophyte manager and he's getting the feel for it. But again, we're in year, when we come on, 2018. Yeah, we're in year 6 of Aaron Boone right now, and he's still making the same mistakes that he's made in 2018. So
it's equivalent to Gary Sanchez or Clint Frazier, or I'm hitting some hard points with you here. It's equivalent to some of these young Yankees who are no longer with the team. Mm-hmm. If they were still just playing mediocre to bad baseball and still on the team, right? Like, that's the equivalent to Aaron Boone, playing mediocre management and still being the manager. So yeah, that's that. All right, that's enough on the Yankees. But let's move over to the Mets and talk about Buck Showalter, because that was a great segue by you, Drew. He seemed to push a lot of right buttons last year, and this year, a lot more question marks, a lot more variables, a lot more moving parts with the New York Mets. They're also, bit by the injury bug, most notably in the starting rotation. They did bring up the young guys, the baby Mets, as people are calling them, and it's been exciting. And then, of course, Andy Martino of SNY, who isn't my number one source for the Mets exactly, but he is a source for the Mets, mentioned that they're considering sending down Francisco Alvarez, which is driving Mets fans absolutely wild. However, part of the problem and why it's actually scary enough to Mets fans is because of the decisions of Buck Showalter. Consistently going back to the Tommy Phams and the Daniel Vogelbachs and those guys on the Mets who haven't been performing. They aren't upside players. Their peaks are decent. And there's all the Escobars of the world as well. There's these guys like Vientos and Beatty and Alvarez who are just getting going, making a positive impact. And Buck is still seeming to push the buttons of those other older guys who led him to many successes last year, but aren't doing that this year. So with the Mets, you look at their lineup, you look at their stats, they're sneaky not bad. Sneaky not bad, Drew. However, they feel as a whole, as a unit, like such a letdown and such a negative, and that is another reason why the Buck button pushing feels like a big problem right now.
Oh, absolutely, and and that's been kind of Buck's thing. Like, it's part of the reason why you bring him in. At the last like 3 jobs he's had, he's come into young teams that are just trying to establish themselves and make sure they just have like a strong culture. And there's a reason why you kind of move on from him when you're ready to kind of take that next step, is because he's kind of stuck in his ways when it comes to those older players. Like at this point, Alvarez proved everything he's had to prove at AAA. He's done everything that he can. The only way he's going to develop is getting at bats at the major league level. And when he first got called up, like he was playing like once or twice a week, and I just didn't understand that. Like, if you don't bring up that caliber of a prospect for him to sit on the bench, it's just, I remember, I think this was like early in the Knicks like playoff run when you weren't really paying attention, but you were so locked in the Knicks that you still noticed that Alvarez wasn't playing as much as he should. Like, that's how like glaring of a weird choice it was for him to do that. And at this point, Vogelbach, Starling Marte's been a little bit better of late, and Vogelbach has that high on base percentage, but and Mark Canha has been a big letdown from the last season to this season. So you have like 2-3 spots in the lineup where you can put in those young impact guys, and you just have to, if you have a potential in-house solution, that basically have proved everything that they have to, that they should do at AAA. Like, I understand the Mets are in a win now mode, but these guys are, outside of Beatty, they're batting in the, bottom third of the lineup, where, kind of how Volpe is with the Yankees, of kind of letting them get their feet wet and get their confidence. And, they have so much upside talent that, like, them not playing is such a disservice to a team, not only now they were trying to win, but in, for the development in the future. So, very curious decisions by Buck for sure.
And what you said there is what I want to continue on, because that argument can be made, and perhaps the Mets brass or Buck Showalter at this point would make the argument of, we are a win-now team, and we believe the win-now players are Canha and Vogelbach and Pham and Escobar. However, there's a real argument to be made that that's just not true. right? Like Escobar has been a very solid player in his life, in his career. He made an all-star team. He was great last year for his standards. He's 34. Tommy Pham, never been much of a player. Like he's been a nice little player his whole career. He's not a great player. He's played over 30 games already this year. He's 35. Daniel Vogelbach has had 1 year with any real power numbers, 1 season. And last year he hit for a good average when he got traded over to the Mets. He's 30. He's not a dynamic player. Yes, he gets on base a lot. Like Mark Canha, 34. Starling Marte, 34. And I do think Marte has a lot of juice left in the tank, and he showed some of it this past weekend. But that argument that those are the guys you should be leaning on, I just don't think it's true. Those players that I mentioned, Pham, Escobar, Vogelbach, they're not in their 30s like McNeil's in his 30s. They're not in their 30s like Nimmo's in his 30s. It's a different beast, right? It's like if you watch a basketball player, and this is obviously a very stupid analogy, but it's like comparing another 38-year-old to a LeBron James. And again, that's a horrible, horrible analogy. But to the point of, you look at Jeff McNeil, who's 31. He's in the same age bracket as Canha, Marte, Vogelbach, Pham, Escobar. Just 2-3 years younger than all of them, if not the same. He's on the prime. These other guys are just not. So to argue that they're the people you should continue to call on, to continue to put in the lineup, it just might not be true. So for today, the argument is not that sturdy. And for 2 months from now, 4 months from now, the argument is completely shaky. Because teams across the league, Drew, and you know this better than me, teams across the league are relying on 23, 24, 25, 26-year-olds all the time. And these 23 to 26-year-olds on the Mets, I mean, Alvarez is only 21, they're good, and they're looked at as top-tier prospects for a reason.
Yep.
They're not just like some Joe Schmoes who got off to a nice start in the majors. They were expected to be players this entire time. So at some point, the seesaw has to flip sides, and we have to now decide as a Mets organization to say, hey, I know it's nice to rely on some veterans who have done this before, but most of these guys actually haven't done this before.
Yeah.
Is that a crazy way to look at it, Drew?
No, absolutely not. And it's like, again, if finding that balance of wanting to win, but again, they're at a point now where they're only going to develop if they're facing major league hitters. And you'll not find a bigger Gary Sanchez fan on this planet than me. Even though he stinks, I love him so much. If they send down Francisco Alvarez so Gary Sanchez can play catcher for the New York Mets, like I will go with you to Citi Field and help burn that mother down. Like that, this is not, it's not acceptable in any stretch of the imagination to do so. And
it's erratic behavior.
Yeah.
It really is.
It's crazy. And again, I like the move for them. I like that, he's a very much a lottery ticket for them, and especially with all of the other catching injuries that they have, if he can come in and turn back the clock to be 2016 to 2019 Gary Sanchez and provide a couple of big hits, or maybe he's here for 2 weeks and then whenever Nito gets healthy, the DFA him, but
get Nito out of here, dude. Another guy who is here. Why is Tomas Nido looked at like a guy who needs to be on this team? I do not get it, Drew. He's never been a successful player. He's never been the type of player who changes any outcomes of baseball games. He's a nice backup catcher.
Yeah.
That's it. That is it. He played 100 games last year. He had 3 home runs and batted .240 with a .275 on base percentage. I don't care how good you frame the ball. I don't care. You just paid Narvaez. You just picked up Gary Sanchez. You have the best catching prospect in baseball in Francisco Alvarez. There is no need for a Tomas Nido on this organization right now.
Yeah.
Zero.
A lot of, and I think I agree with you. I think if your catcher can actually hit league average or better, I think that more than makes up for defensive, miscues or framing or anything like that. But a lot of teams have just been absolutely punting the catching position because a guy is good defensively or he works well with the staff or, things like that. And am I seeing this correctly? Thomas Nido is out with dry eye syndrome. Like what?
Yeah, something with his eye socket or something.
Oh, okay. Get some eye drops. I don't understand.
But no, listen, I get that. But you have a guy in Narvaez who actually, looked pretty good. Looked pretty good in his first 2 weeks before he, went out on the injury. And he seems like a guy who deserves to get paid a little bit and deserves to be on this team. I would so much rather, like, if they do bring Nido back, which is fine, like, they better keep Alvarez and Sanchez and then use Alvarez as a DH on off days.
Yeah.
They're not going to do that, obviously, because that makes too much sense. That must be one of those crazy things, Drew, that only fans think of, but it doesn't make sense and it's unrealistic. That's one of those things, right? It's like, why would you not do that? Oh, does it make too much sense? Like, Alvarez needs to get at bat all the time at this point, right? And if he's going to sit once or twice a week because he's a catcher and he has to, so be it. Then bring up 3 catchers and use him as a DH occasionally. There's other teams that do it. There's other teams that do it sometimes, right? So I don't get it, and I'm now nervous that the buttons that are going to be pushed are not going to be the correct ones. They're not going to be the ones that keep this team more relevant in 4 months and more relevant in 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I couldn't agree with you more. I can't believe we've gotten like 20 minutes into the Mets season. We haven't talked about their rotation or their bullpen like whatsoever.
I know. It's a good point.
And that's been, going into the season, those were the 2 biggest question marks. And we've spent all this time just talking about, the offense so much.
Right. Well, it's I guess it's a little bit more top of mind. Verlander had a nice outing the other day.
Yeah.
Scherzer, he's working back. He's not been like he's been bad, but he's not been like a 9 ERA guy, right? And he has a room to come back, and the suspension and the injury, yada yada. So I do agree that we're going to talk about the rotation in a second and the bullpen as well, which is not very good. But the batting is important to me.
Yeah.
Because entering this year, the question mark was health of pitching staff, depth of pitching staff, if you will, as well. And then the power hitting. And who are the other power hitters outside of Alonso? And I don't know if you want to count Lindor. Who are they? Who are they right now, Drew?
I'm looking at Alvarez is number 3 on the team with 5 home runs.
Alvarez
and Beatty, Nimmo,
and the guy who's played 3 games in Vientos are the most likely to have actual power for this team moving forward.
Yeah,
that's it. Those are the top 3, and I'm not saying definitely, just most likely. They are the most likely to have pop in this lineup. It's not Canna, even though I like him and he had a great year last year. McNeil is a different animal, and he's fantastic. We love him. Lindor is Lindor at this point, and I trust him. He'll be there every day. Fantastic. Marte wasn't a power hitter last year despite the good year. Vogelback isn't a power hitter despite his hefty build. The other power hitters after Alonso and Lindor are Beatty, Alvarez, and Vientos. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
No, I agree. And again, I think the next step forward for the Mets on the offense is to really find that complement with Alonso that, have his Anthony Rizzo to, his 1A that you can definitely rely on to, give you that power production. Because again, Lindor, this was the problem going into the year. Lindor being your second biggest power threat is not great. And again, he doesn't get on base enough, so you're kind of forcing him to be that number 2, number 3 hitter when he's probably better off hitting like 6th or 7th, just because, again, if he does have a little bit more pop, but, realistically, you would want someone a little bit, a more complete player batting at the top of the lineup than Lindor. And I love Lindor, but, it's just...
Me too. He could be better throughout the rest of the year.
Yes.
He was better last year, so he could be better. I'm with you 100%. But before we move on to the pitchers, I just got to say this, because we've only mentioned him in passing. By God, Pete Alonso is a monster.
Oh my!
He really is a monster. Drew. And yeah, he's batting 230 right now, and he might be that prototypical power bat in today's MLB who, outkicks his coverage with power and doesn't matter that his percentages aren't special. Because, boy, similarly to Judge, honestly, and I don't think that's a crazy thing to say, similarly to Judge, this team would be in shambles without Pete Alonso.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's with the 230 average because of his power and his clutchness and his ability to just drive the baseball. It is impressive, and he's been a stud. It is now realistic to say he is a top tier player in the National League or in baseball.
Absolutely. And, he's on pace right now for 60-something home runs. So, right now, nobody has hit more home runs since he's come up in 2019 than him. So,
and that includes Judge.
That includes Judge. That absolutely includes Judge
because he missed time.
Yeah, but he has the most home runs since 2019. So he's absolutely the premier power hitter in baseball. And if the Mets lost him for any kind of significant amount of time, that'd be pretty much a death blow to the offense.
Yeah, and that's I was saying before about the Yankees can't rely on Judge all year, all playoffs. Obviously, it happened last year in the playoffs. The Mets can't rely on Alonso all year to drive in 130 runs because it's not sustainable when it comes down to it. It's just not. But yeah, he's been amazing. I love him, and I hope he keeps it up because he seems like he's an unstoppable home run force.
Yeah,
and I look forward to continuing to watch him just mash baseballs.
He's so much fun.
He really is so much fun. Let's talk about the rotation. Let's start with Scherzer and Verlander. Is there enough to point to with Verlander's last start after his first start back from injury? Now he's back officially. His ERA is down to a 3.6. Again, that's only in 4 starts, so it's not like a ton of sample size. His whip's under 1. He looked really good in his last start, went 8 innings. Is there enough there yet, Drew, to say that he's going to start getting back into form and maybe being an anchor for this team?
Yeah, I think so. I think coming into the year again, you were worried about the injury bug. So hopefully he got it all out of the way, beforehand. But again, you can't really rely on, them both staying healthy. Maybe they'll go on the IL maybe one more time each the rest of the way. But while they're pitching, I think they're both going to be very effective. And I was very encouraged by Verlander against what was it? That was the start against Cleveland where he went 8.
Yeah.
Him and Bieber went.
Yeah.
Him versus
Bieber.
That was a pretty gutsy outing by him. He definitely kept the team in the game. So yeah, I think he's been as advertised so far. I don't think you're ever going to get the Cy Young pitcher, but I think you're going to get very much an above average, top of the rotation type of guy. Maybe not a Cy Young. Justin Verlander, but you're definitely going to get, a very good pitcher that, along with him and Scherzer. And Kodai, man, I love Kodai. Every time, I'll turn off the Yankees to watch Kodai pitch. He's been so much fun. Ton of strikeouts for him, too. 55 and 43 innings so far. A little too many walks, but again, I think that's going to be, given, his adjustment to, pitching in, the majors and the ball and all that stuff. But man, Kodai has been my pleasant surprise for the Mets rotation so far.
And when you look at the rotation and kind of how it shakes down, because I agree with you on Kodai Senga, obviously his first 2 starts were probably better than his next 2 starts, but he's kind of settled into a medium there where the ERA looks solid, the strikeouts are awesome, like you said, the stuff is absolutely living up to some of the hype that was there. Yeah. It's electric watching him pitch. He's very fun, and I do have expectations of him staying at a level of being like a real good number 3 with a number 2 type upside, right? Like he does have that in him. And you look at Tyler McGill, who was one of the young guys who I liked best last year, who didn't always get the opportunity. He's been thrusted into it and basically been one of the more reliable guys for the Mets this entire year as well. He's looking solid, and that leads you to, because we spoke about Verlander already, it leads you to Max Scherzer. So if Max Scherzer can get back to a point of being a 1 or a 2 or somewhere in that realm, you are now looking at a rotation that looked so bleak, that looked like 1.5 starters why those two guys were out, to now looking like a rotation with 4 guys you can trust. So I do believe there is some hope here. I believe there's a little bit of a greener grass somewhere out there with this Mets rotation, because even though Carrasco's been bad and that 5th starter spot has been a little bit of a difficult spot to fill, Peterson's been horrendous.
Oh my
this
God,
year.
that's been such a. I was back in
Horrendous.
I was a big Dave Peterson guy, and he showed a lot of guts last year, and I such a disappointment that he had an ERA. He was kind of doing his Tyron McGill thing, last year.
Yeah.
But man, this year ERA, I think it's like north of 8 for him. Oh, so it's been absolutely not what you want from some guy who was expected to take the next step forward. So he's been my biggest disappointment on the Mets so far. A guy who wasn't really even supposed to be counted on, but when he was given, much like Clark Schmidt, was given a golden opportunity to show that he's a part of the future of this team, and now God, you kind of you're so thankful that McGill was able to step up, and that Carrasco is healthy now, even though he hasn't pitched so great. But Quintana is on his way back too, so you're not going to have to worry through another David Peterson start unless there's some more serious injuries. Hopefully not on the way.
So is it fair for me to say that there's hope for this rotation?
Absolutely.
Is it fair for me to say that I can look into a crystal ball and make a reasonable, unbiased prediction of them being above average in a month?
Yeah, I absolutely. Again, the Kodai is going to continue. Again, once he gets his walks under control, I think Kodai will be more of a number 2 type starter than a number, he's kind of pitching to more of like a 3-4 type starter. So Kodai's got a bunch of upside. Verlander and Scherzer, again, as long as they stay healthy, I think you can be reasonable, assuming that they're going to, maybe not pitch 8 innings every time, but they'll definitely give you above average, definitely give you a chance to win every single day. And if you could do that, 4 out of your 5 starters, that's a real blessing to have, because not a lot of teams, especially considering the state of the Braves rotation right now, they would kill to have a Tyler McGill or a Kodai Senga in their rotation right now. Right now, it's super bleak over in Atlanta.
Yeah, and they're hanging on obviously over there. But last thing on the Mets before we finish up for the podcast here, the bullpen is obviously not deep, right?
No.
Like there's a bunch of guys who you do not trust. There's a few guys who are decent, and there's been 1.5 guys who have been pretty damn good. And the number 1 guy is David Robertson. I mean, he's been absolutely a beast actually to this point. 1.27 ERA, in 21 innings. It's not a small sample size anymore for a reliever at this point. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's been fantastic at the age 38. Ottavino is that guy who just it almost feels like he's out there just a little bit too much in a little bit of too high leverage situations, mm-hmm. but he's okay. And, you do kind of trust him to a weird extent, even with some of the home run balls he's given up and some of the blow up innings he's given up. But no, the bullpen, man, they're going to have to do something to be better there. Mm-hmm. There's things with the offense that we question, but there's a lot of buttons to be pushed. There's health concerns for the starting pitching and waiting for them to get right. For the bullpen, Drew, there is no question. Mm. They need to be better. They need better arms. I don't know how it's going to happen or when it's going to happen, but would you call this the biggest weakness on the team right now, or do you still think the hitting or the injuries are worse?
No, it's the bullpen by now. Again, you're never going to replace Diaz, but Robertson has done an absolute fantastic job, and I knew he was. David Robertson been sneakily one of he's not going to have the saves, but he was on a semi, if you just look at his career numbers, they're he'll never get into the Hall of Fame because he doesn't have saves, but absolutely on par his numbers with some of the Lee Smith, those type of guys that that got into the Hall of Fame later in on their ballots. So David Robinson very much in that ilk of an ageless wonder, and so I expected big things from him before the beginning of the year. Ottavino, the biggest problem with him is, again, he's a matchup reliever that's being masqueraded in a setup role because, again, Drew Smith and Brooks Riley, I like them both. They're not. They're more suited for the middle innings, and Ottavino closed once upon a time, so he's kind of being forced into a role that's not really suited towards him. And I joked about this in the group chat, but Aroldis Chapman will be on in this Mets bullpen before the end of the year. It's too high profile of a move. Chapman's got his he's throwing 104 again. He absolutely will be in this Mets bullpen before the end of the year. And you don't want it, but it's just this gut feeling I have. Aroldis Chapman will be a Met come July.
The worst part is that you don't want it, but I don't hate it.
No,
like it's like Gary Sanchez.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Gary Sanchez. There's a world where it works well.
Yeah.
There's a world where it works out. There's a world where it's horrible, but then you move on.
Yeah.
Right? So it's kind of like this very low risk move. It's possible. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, but I don't know, Drew. To wrap up here, let's just do a quick little meter here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? On the low end, let's say 1 is panic, 10 is like contender confidence. Where do you land? We'll do the Mets first and we'll flip back to the Yankees. So 1 is panic, 10 is contender confidence. Where do you land on the New York Mets?
I don't like giving round numbers, so I give them like a 7.2 out of 10 on the confidence level. Again, the rotation's starting to shape out a little. As long as Buck plays the kids, I'll feel so much better about the offense there again. And the bullpen will get addressed in time. And again, Uncle Steve ready to take on salary, ready to do whatever he has to do. So I'm very, very confident in their ability to improve. And as long as Buck plays the kids, I'm feeling 7.2 is a very much an appropriate confidence level for the Mets right now.
That feels very appropriate. I'm going to go a little higher on the projectoral. I don't know if that's a word, but on the projectoral front,
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's going to be a moment in about a month where we say, wow, remember when we were horrible for like 3 weeks? We were like 4-16 for a while there. Like that was really bad. How are we that bad? And you look back and Scherzer was not there or bad. Verlander wasn't there. There was injuries on offense. Marte was a disaster. And you look forward and Beatty, Vientos, Alvarez are playing and Marte's a little bit better and Lindor's average gets up a little bit. And you say, oh, wow, we're 2 games behind the Braves. We're doing okay. So I'm giving a 7.8 on the Mets front. Just a little bit higher because I think like if you're in the 8s on the Mets right now, that's putting them not right behind the Braves. That's putting them like right with the Braves. And I think that's a little bit too aggressive just based off of where they are currently. So that's where I'm going there. All right, Drew. The Yankees. Again, same meter. 1 being panic, 10 being contender confidence. Where do you lie on the New York Yankees?
They've been playing so much better of late, but again, is that masquerading? Again, beating bad teams, but they did go up. They beat Toronto pretty handily, and they just had a nice comeback win versus Baltimore. So they're improving. Aaron Judge is nuclear. They're starting to get a little healthy. Volpe's developing, so I probably give a 7.6. Again, I'm still pretty concerned about the rotation. They're definitely overusing Ron Marinaccio in the bullpen, but King, Holmes, and Peralta have all been pretty great, and they have basically a whole army of relievers that are either injured and possibly coming back. The wise guy hasn't really pitched all this year. Neither is Canely. They're both coming back, so I'm feeling a little more confident about the Yankees right now because they're actually. They beat some teams that the direct competition right now, and they played the Rays pretty tough. Those 2 weekends, last couple of weeks. So the 7.6.
I think that's the perfect number. I was leaning in that range, but just to give a little bit of a different take, I'm going to give a really insulting number here. You ready? 7.0. Ugh. Doesn't even just feel bad to say. It feels naughty. And you're given on a point scale.
Yeah.
You can't say 0.0,
Yeah.
right? You just can't. 7.0, Drew, because in the sixes is not fair to what they've done, even with all this injuries. But the 7.0 is because that offense is so blah to me. It really is. There's not words. There's only sounds. When Aaron Judge is doing his thing, they're woohoo. When they're not having Aaron Judge carry them, you don't know where the offense is coming from. There's not really much to point to otherwise. And that makes me very uneasy when it comes to the Yankees. And it's mostly on a scale of we've seen this before. Mm-hmm. So that 7.0 has a baked in 90 wins and a playoff berth. But the 7.0 is there because I don't know what to point to put them at 0.6, 0.8, 0.9, 8.1, 8.4, because I just don't know what it is. I only know what I know, and it's Judge carries that.
And it's the opposite of the Mets, where I could say that they have the kids there, and they have those young upside players that will improve and help carry them. Again, the Yankees have Jake Bauers and Willie Calhoun and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa and Greg Allen coming into the lineup. Those are wow. They're just not for whatever reason. Peraza was. He was too good to trade, but he's not good enough to, get at bats on the major league level every day. So it's just, it's never one of those things where, the Yankees are very telling on which prospects they like and which ones they believe in. Actions are speaking louder than words. They may say, we love Peraza, we love, he's great, but the Yankees were in desperate need of offense, and Peraza was, sitting on the bench when he was up here. So, they clearly don't like him as much as he was getting benched for Isaiah Kiner-Falefa and Aaron Hicks at points. So so the help is not coming. So I think that's a pretty justified number. But
it was purposely insulting, but that's not because they're not good. It's because I don't know how they get better. Yeah. That's the question for offense. For offense, the health on pitching is obvious. But all right, Drew, that's all we got. What a wonderful time to talk baseball with you yet again. I don't know when we'll talk again. Perhaps we'll get back in there next week. Why not? Yeah. We'll see how this week goes for baseball, for the Mets, and for the Yankees. We also have some NBA Finals to talk about next week, which I'll have to hit on. Shout out to my boy, Nikola Jokic. Should have put him in the open. So proud. So happy to watch my man shine and get the credit he deserves. And I think the Celtics won Game 5 or Game 4 here. So we're going to Game 5 with them. But it seems like we'll have Heat Nuggets, the series that ESPN and Disney was dreaming of, I'm sure.
Instead of Lakers Celtics.
Yeah, but it's okay because Jokic is everything. He's everything. But all right, Drew, thank you so much, as always. Subway Sports Talk is on Apple Podcasts app, Spotify, and on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on your podcast app. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment on YouTube. You can follow us on social media at Subway Sports Talk on Instagram and TikTok, at Subway Sports Talk TLK on Twitter. Drew is at _Swallows Barkley on the Twitter, and I'm at Pete Kennedy with 2 Y's. So that's it. That's all we got. Baseball talk, basketball talk coming soon. Whole lot of sports still to talk about as we approach summer. Always sports talk.
See ya.
Cheers.
We're family. See ya.
I jumped on you there, Drew. Let's try that again. Ready? Subway Sports Talk. Cheers.
We're family. See ya.